Hey all, today we're talking Owlboy for the Nintendo Switch. This is a game that I bought kind of on an impulse. When I first got the Switch, I looked at what games were coming out and I saw this one on Amazon and I did the pre-order thing where you save a little money and order it ahead of time. I thought it'd be cool to get a physical copy, and I like to support all the indies that I can. With the Switch, I play a lot of indie games. That's been one of my favorite things about the Switch, so this was one of them. And I got it when it first came out, started it, and didn't get too into it. So it's taken this long before I've gone back and actually played the whole thing. So I guess we'll talk about why. This game, if you're not familiar with it at all, it's a platformer. It's got some light puzzle elements, and the biggest thing that separates it from most platformers is that you can fly in it. So that takes away, I guess, the platforming aspect of it really, because almost the entire game you have the ability to fly, unlimited flight. So there's not really a lot of like skill-based jumping or anything like that going on. And kind of the gimmick of it is while you can fly, you can't really do a whole lot with your character by yourself. You have kind of a spin that can stun enemies, but doesn't really do damage, and most doesn't really do a lot to interact with the environment usually, only in a couple cases. So really it relies on you carrying other people, and those people can do things. So right off the bat, you start with your best friend named Getty that you can carry around, and he has a pistol, so you can shoot bad guys and you can break certain rocks in the environment, things like that. So that's how you kind of interact with things, and you'll gain two other characters throughout the game. So basically, the first one has a pistol that you can enhance by gathering coins in the game to shoot farther. The second one has it's another type of gun, but it makes a big like explosion blast at first, and then it takes a while to recharge, probably about 10 seconds. And when it's not recharged yet, it makes a small flame come out, and you could use that to light certain things on fire. And then the last character you get, he shoots a spider web, and you could shoot those as kind of impact bursts to hit enemies, or if you hold it down, target something, it'll zip you to it. So he's kind of like a Spider-Man type of guy. So those are the three characters that you interact with and can use for your controls. The game feels very much like a PlayStation 1 kind of game to me. It looks like a 32-bit. It looks like something that could have come out in that time. And quite frankly, it plays like it. There's not a lot to set this aside as like a modern masterpiece, in my opinion. This feels like it could have happened at any point. Whereas something like Shovel Knight, a game that I love, takes that 8-bit aesthetic and adds a lot to it, and is actually doing things that couldn't have been done at the time, and taking kind of all the game design we've learned since then and putting it in. This feels like something that someone, like a game that was just unreleased in the late 90s to me, in good and bad ways. The bad I found pretty irritating. Checkpoints are just kind of arbitrary where the game decides to save. So there'll be portions where it'll be too far between checkpoints and you'll have to do something over and over again that you can die at, and that's pretty irritating. Sometimes those also have not cutscenes, they're in-game cutscenes basically. Your characters will talk, and it's almost constant. That's another thing I did not care for in this game. It puts a lot of focus on story, and the action's constantly being stopped so characters can talk to you. And your character's mute, by the way, so you're not really even interacting back, which makes it even a little more kind of nonsensical. But I did not care for constantly being stopped to play out cutscenes. You could also talk to people at will. I don't mind that because that's more interactive, but just every time you're like flying to a new room, suddenly it has to stop and it has to show your character friends talking to you about what's going on, and it just breaks the flow pretty bad. That happens a lot, and then the way those are initiated is kind of clunky too, because maybe you're carrying one of the characters, but then for the cutscene to start, all of a sudden the character has to be teleported and standing next to you, and you're just dropped on the ground. There'll be things like that where suddenly your character's not flying and walking really slowly through an area just because the game wants to kind of create a mood and put you in that situation. It's a very linear game. It's got a very straightforward story, but it also lets you kind of go anywhere at any time, which makes it very confusing because it's not, even though it's very straightforward on what it wants you to do, it'll just throw the name at you. You're supposed to remember where they're talking about, and hopefully you've memorized all the places you've been in case you got to backtrack or something. And there's no map, so if you're like me and you're not playing it through straightforward, and you take breaks and stuff, you're gonna be mixed up on where you're trying to go and what's going on. So I didn't care for that. I don't really like the controls. It never felt intuitive to me. A game where you can fly sounds really fun, but the way it's executed is not. Basically, you jump, and then if you push up or push the jump again, you'll hover, and then you just push which direction you want to move. So it doesn't really feel like there's anything to the flight. There's no weight to your character. You just kind of floating weightlessly and then moving around, almost like you're just moving a mouse icon or something. It never felt right. And then it's pretty slow. You can do kind of a barrel roll in the air to speed things up sometimes, but it always felt off. The button to trigger like a regular jump versus, or the roll and then the flying, and if you hit flying button again you'll fall, and I never felt intuitive to me, and it never felt very good. Another thing that I really didn't like is the knockback in this game is ridiculous. So I know like games like Castlevania and old school ones like that get some flack for knockback. In this game, if you're hit, you'll drop whoever your character is carrying at the time, which isn't a big deal because they just teleport. You don't have to like take care of these people, thankfully, but your character will fly across basically the entire screen and bang into a wall or bang into something. And there's not a whole lot of like invincibility frames either, so it's easy to get like knocked around. And if there's a hazardous area underneath, like there's a lava section, and you get knocked, it's just an instant death. There are no lives, so you can do things over and over as much as you want. And some of these kind of scripted moments, for me at least, take a bunch of tries. Like there's part where you fight kind of a dragon, and then to leave the area you have to ride the dragon. Sounds pretty cool. Aesthetically it's cool, but you can only push left or right on your control stick, and it's going all around and upside down, so left and right relative to what's happening on the screen gets kind of mixed up, and then you have to guide it so you're not banging into things. And I had to do that, I don't know, a dozen times. It was irritating. There's part where a similar thing where you fly out of a cannon and you can only push left or right, and the mechanics are kind of crazy on how you loop around and you have to navigate between the environment and stuff. And I did that, I don't even know how many times before I got all the rings and got to the end. Probably like 60 times. That took forever. So stuff like that, irritating. The boss battles, there's quite a few bosses, and those range from being really easy to really, really difficult, where I had to play them over and over and over again. And it seems no rhyme or reason. Like some of the later bosses aren't that hard, some of the early ones are. It's kind of all over the place with that. So overall, I did not love the game. I don't like to be too negative on these kind of things, and I like to support the indies, but this one just felt unpolished. The visuals, you can kind of see it running behind me. It looks okay, but to me it looks really derivative of a lot of other games. It doesn't have a style that really appeals to me. A lot of the stuff is like little floating islands, and that's cool and all, and it has this arbitrary day and night cycle that doesn't affect anything but just happens, and the sunset times look kind of pretty, but that's just another example of like things happen, but there's not like a rhyme or reason to it, why it's day and night. It doesn't affect anything that I can tell. So overall, a disappointing game, pretty mediocre. Not something that I can strongly recommend. I would probably give it a 5 out of 10. It's just very middle of the road. It's probably not something I'll be playing again. I mean, I own it, so maybe at some point I'll try it again and see if I could get a little more enjoyment out of it now that I know where to go all the time. But overall, it's just not my kind of thing. It's very story focused, and the story wasn't interesting to me. It also has a very anime style to the story, and what I mean by that is everyone has ridiculous, over-the-top, exaggerated emotions and reactions to everything. For instance, your best friend Getty that's with you throughout the game is a cowardly character, but then puts on fronts to be overly brave, like constantly, and is prone to just like shouting and anger over anything, and it just feels very forced and over the top for, I guess, comedic sake. I don't even know. But all the characters are basically like that. There was one moment that I found kind of touching in it where this teacher that's been very abusive to you throughout the game kind of apologizes and explains himself, and then you have kind of a long hug, and that was pretty much the only part of the story that I like connected with. Everything else is like just wanted to get through it, and the parts where you couldn't skip the dialogue and you had to see it again after you died, oh, no good. So yeah, that's my take on Owlboy. I was disappointed. Let me know what you think of it if you've played it. If I'm off base and you think it's fantastic, let me know about it. If you agree, let me know that too. And I guess that's it for now. Until next time.